All right, this video is part two for our Fusion 360 CAD design. It's got our base chassis that we're working on. Now I opened this up back in. If we go into our data, when we first open up, everything is saved in our Albert Lee Robotics shared folder. And so what we would do is we would go from home, go under our Vex builds. You would go to the correct team that you're on, double click to open it up, find the model that you have created or that you're working on, right click, and we do open, and that'll open up the model. And so what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you guys how to create, this video is all about creating sub assemblies to help us better prototype and model our stuff and put what we're going to make is basically our drive assemblies. And so what we're going to do here, the first thing we're going to do is go in and insert in our V5 motor, show you some of the ways, or the best way to insert a motor. So we're going to go under our VRC parts, under electronics. I'm going to right click and insert into current design. I'm going to insert in a motor. As with everything, what we want to do is kind of get it so that it's oriented the right way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate this that 90 degrees, and I'm going to drop it right into here. So this actually looks pretty good. I don't want to have to rotate around. I've got my V5 cable and connection is going to go right here. So I'm going to drop my motor right into this part of the chassis to make our wheelbase. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around, find the front of it. So I'm going to rotate around because I'm going to create the joint again to get this. I'm going to just rotate around this. And what I want is for this to work is I want to put my drive shaft is going to insert in, and I've got it set up looking at my model, or my motor, my robot. It's going to go into the fifth hole of my C chassis. Or my C channel. So what I want to do is you don't connect to this face, because if we do this, your motor posts are going to actually be extended through. So what we want to do is connect to it. So if I know this is going to go into the fifth hole, then this would go the hole just to the left of that. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in, J to start my joint. I'm going to go on to this front face. This is what I want to do. So I'm just going to click on this front face because that's the face that I want attached to my C channel. Then I'm going to come back across here, and this is going to go on this inside C channel here. So I'm going to rotate this around so that I can see. Now I know that mine 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 is where I want my drive shaft to go. I got to go one more because the way that it's oriented. So I'm going to go right here. So then I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to click to choose this inside face of my C channel. And it's very important when you're inserting in your V5 motors that you select either the top or the bottom. I get in the habit of the top, so I'm going to do the top right in the middle. Now there is going to be some change that we're going to need to do, so don't hit OK just yet. I'm going to rotate this around, show you what I'm talking about. So when I rotate this around, one of the things that you're going to notice, and I look right through and I get head on here, you're going to notice that the actual opening for our drive shaft, or where our screws would go, is lined up halfway. It's not lined up exactly so that the opening is where it needs to be. So, but when we add in our motors, the one thing that we want to do, and this is why we do the top or the bottom, what we do before we hit OK, we have this ability, we can go up or down. So we're going to shift this motor down some. We're going to go down. And when it goes down, it's going to go down. We're going to go negative 0.091 inches. So negative 0.091 inches, and then we're going to hit OK. When we do that, here's what we're going to look at. When we rotate around now, everything is going to be lined up exactly as we want it, right? So if I get this lined up, you can see right in there. Here we go. So I've got, let me get this. My mouse is a little finicky here. Look at that. I got it here. There it is. So now our openings are lined up exactly as we want them to be. So our C channels are perfect. Everything is lined up exactly as we want it to be. And you'll also notice that this is a good model because, like, if I had my V5 connections on the inside here, that would be very problematic to get and connect into my V5 connections. So having my V5 cable connection on the outside here would be super easy to do. So now we've got our motor connected. We're going to set up our drive pod, and then we're going to create ourselves a sub assembly. So the next piece that I want to do is I'm going to insert in a shaft collar or a bearing shaft, bearing flat. So I know that we've got those. I've put those under motion because that's going to be where that's all part of our motion. So I'm going to go down here. Here's my bearing flats. And you have your high strength. This is just regular bearing flat. So I'm going to right click, insert my bearing flat into the current design. There's my bearing flat. So now what I can do is I'm going to move it, kind of get it close to where I want it to be. So it doesn't have to be exact. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate this just a little bit. So I don't want it up and down like it is. I'll move this up some, move this over some, so I kind of get it to where we want it to be. And I am actually going to rotate this so it's 90 degrees, so it's laying flat. There it is. So I kind of have it, it's not exactly, but it's set up so that it looks like it's going the right direction, right? So this is going to go in on our bearing flats. Now, one of the things when we're setting up and we're making our bearing, when we're doing our bearing flats, like if we can, the ideal situation would be to have our bearing flats going through our drive shaft, going through the center of our bearing flat. So this fifth hole, hole 5 here, right? If I look at this, hole number 5 here should be where our bearing flat goes through. So this fifth hole is where we want our bearing flat to go through. So if we want that to go through the center, so what I'm going to do here is we're going to connect this up. Now, we always want to join for our motor, and this is going to make a lot of sense here in just a second, is we want our motor to join to the bearing flats, and we're going to create it all into an assembly. We don't want to put our bearing flats to our C channel, make the joints to the motor, and it'll make sense here in a second. So if I want my drive shaft to go through the center one, I'm actually going to join this one that's on the left to this screw opening here. So this is where I want it to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate around to make sure that I'm on the right face. And I'm going to click J for joint. I'm going to join my first part in, zoom in. I'm going to get onto this face so that I'm on the front face of it. Now, one of the things that's nice because we're doing the square C channel opening and the round opening, we got that where was that offset where we're centered. But what we can do with the round openings is we can go to the center point and it'll do the center of that round opening. And then we can rotate that around and drop that into the center of our C channel opening here. Now what we want to do, and this is super important, we're going to get this to where it is going to go through our center opening. So we just want to be able to see it. So we want to zoom in here, and what we're going to do is this center of this piece here, this is where we're going to go. So we're going to click right there, and that is going to join in our opening. So we're going to hit OK, and that's going to bring in our bearing flat. Now, what we need to do, I need to go back and edit that joint. So I forgot one thing. So when we did that, put it right against, actually, I'm going to undo that. So we're going to hit the undo button. I did not get the right face. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to rotate this around, do that again. So I'm going to come in here, J for my joint. I am going to grab this inside face. Okay, then what I'm going to do is rotate this around. Zoom back just a little bit so I can see what I'm looking at here. And what we want to do is I'm going to zoom in onto this. Okay, so what we want to do is I'm going to zoom into this. And I want to get to this center part. There it is. So there's the center. And I'm going to come right into center point right here. Okay, so now we've got it connected there. Now here's what we want to do with this is we are not done with this yet. What we want to do is we're going to move this out because this actually is going to go on the inside of this one. So what I'm going to do here, if you see this, is I'm going to move this to the left so that it gets lined up right where I want it to be. And what we want to do is 2.75 if we've got a 3-inch opening. We've got it set up there. So now we're going to hit OK. And that bearing flat is lined up directly where we want it to be. So now what we're going to do is we're going to come in. We're going to insert another bearing flat. So I'm going to right click, insert a bearing flat into our design. I'm going to rotate this so that it's set up facing the right direction for me. Let's do this. I'm going to kind of bring it over here closer so I've got it kind of where I want it to be. It is, I got it dropped way down low. So let's bring this way up, bring this way over, bring this up some more. And then what we want to do with this one is we're going to rotate this so that it's staying at that 90 degrees. But then I also am going to rotate, I want it to spin the other way so that it's facing the right direction. So I'm going to rotate around on this side of it. And I'm going to rotate it this way. So it's going to rotate 180 degrees. There it is. So now when we do this, and I can actually move this across a little bit, make it a little bit easier. So it's kind of in the way where I want it to be. So now I've got it in here. So now what we're going to do, same thing, we're going to join this to our motor. Now what I would do is join it to the, so I've got this joined here. So same thing, I want it to join my center post, and this is going to go to the left post, just like we did with this last one. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to join the back of it. So I'm going to come in here, J for my joint, to join it, come to the back face, center spot, and I'm going to rotate this around. There's my C-channel opening, and I'm going to click right here on that center dot. Boom. And there it is. So now I've got this joined, and I'm going to hit OK. So now I've got my two bearing flats. So if I look right, I'm kind of on this, I'm going to look straight through. So when I look straight through, you're going to see that everything is lined up exactly as it should. Okay, so there's going to be my wheel. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to show you how to insert in. Now, this is why we want to do this. Now, let me show you this, right? So here's why we want to do this. So let's say that we're prototyping, and we've got our bearing flats are joined to the motor, not joined to the C-channel. Something happens, whatever it is, and we decide that we need to change our motor position. Too far forward, we want to put our wheels further back. I can go find that joint. So if I look in my timeline, I can say, okay, here's my motor, and then I made the joint right after the motor. So if I go right here, I can click on this joint. That's going to be my first joint. So if I go right click and I edit this joint, so I'm going to edit that joint, and we decide that we need to move it down. Now, if we go down here, so let's just say for whatever reason, we're going to move it to the right, and we always do it in 1/2 inch or 1 inch. We're going to move it 1 inch to the right. So we're going to move our post to the right. When I hit OK, watch what happens. When I do that, it has moved my bearing flats as well. So I don't have to go back in and rechange all of the joints because we've joined everything to that motor pod or that drive pod. So when we're prototyping, if we're trying to change something, we can quickly change the placement of our wheels or our drive pod, which is what we're going to create in our sub assembly. So I'm going to go back in and I'm going to edit that joint. I'm going to hit the undo button. Let's undo that last joint. Let's go back in and edit that joint. So I'm going to go back in here, and I'm going to click on that joint. edit that joint, and we're going to move that back 1 inch. There it is. And we're in okay. So our joint is back to where we want it to be. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put in our drive shaft. Okay, so here's my drive shaft. I'm going to go back into our drive shafts. And I'm going to insert in the 4-inch drive shaft just to show you guys here. Now, we probably would shave down a drive shaft, so this might not be long enough to, well, this will be long enough to show us to get in. So we're going to insert this into our current design. There's my drive shaft. Okay, now here is what we're going to do with our drive shaft. So I'm going to, again, just going to rotate it because I want it to kind of go this way in here. So it's going to look like, so it sort of goes in the right direction. We've got our drive shaft. We are going to join our drive shaft, again, same thing to our motor. So I'm going to rotate this around, and I want to get this back end of the drive shaft because this is the end that's going to go in. So I'm going to go down to the end of it here. I'm going to hit J for my joint, go right down into this face, and I'm going to click right here on this center point of my drive shaft. So that's the end that's going to go in. I'm going to rotate this around. Okay, and I'm going to rotate this around. I'm going to get into our drive shaft. Now, before we connect this, here's what I want you guys to do. Before we get this connected, we're going to click on this right tab here, left click on this tab called Motion. And what we're going to do here is we're going to change the type of joint that we've got. So instead of being a rigid joint, which is when we're connecting our structure and it doesn't have any kind of motion to it, we're going to click and we're going to choose Revolute. So this is a new type of joint for us. So this is our Revolute. And we're going to pick our second position. And what we're going to do here is we're going to rotate this around so that I can see right into where my drive shaft is. And we're going to zoom right in, and we're going to go right on the inside of this drive shaft on the gray part, which is going to be the inside of our drive shaft, right on that inside piece. I'm going to click right on the center, and when I do, what's going to happen is it's going to bring our joint in, and you've known you made a Revolute joint because when I click this button, the joint will actually rotate itself several times to let you know that it's creating a Revolute joint. It's aligning itself. So I'm going to click it once. It's going to bring the joint in, and it rotates it. Okay, so that's going to rotate it. Now, for me, nobody's going to see on the inside of it, but I want to line it up, make it look good. So I'm going to rotate my drive shaft so that it does line up perfectly. So I'm going to rotate it so that it sets up exactly as it's supposed to. So there's our drive shaft. So it's going to be set up. I'm going to hit the OK button, and I have my drive shaft connected. Okay. Now, I am going to make, for this demonstration video, I'm going to make a very basic drive pod for you guys and show you guys how to do that. So this, obviously, I'm telling you right now, would not be the ideal for us because I have very little room. I probably would want to go with a longer drive shaft, and I could extrude the ends in so that I have enough to put my shaft collar on here and move my C-channel a little bit closer together. So what we're going to do here, though, is I'm going to put a wheel on here. So I'm going to go back into our motion, go to our wheels, and I'm going to find the wheel that I want to put on here. So I'm going to do a 4-inch Omni wheel. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to insert it into our current design. And there's our motor. And again, just want to get it so that it's lined up kind of the right way. So I'm going to rotate it that 90 degrees. And I'm going to put my motor on here. So the way that we're going to do this, again, we join our part to it. So I'm going to come over here. And what you're going to want to do with your motor is you're going to have to look at and make sure that there's different motors that have the different inserts. This has got the black insert in it, which is important because the black insert is for our motors that are going to be attached to the motors, or our wheels that are attached to the motors so that they actually turn with the motor. If you have the green inserts, then your wheel will free spin. And so this is not a free spinning wheel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit J for my joint. And what you want to do is don't pick this inside edge. You want to pick the flat part that's actually inside the insert of the motor. So I'm going to zoom in so I can see that inside. I'm going to click the center point of that flat side. And then I'm going to go to my wheel. or my drive shaft. So I'm going to get over to the drive shaft that we just had. And again, we want to make sure that we're going to the right section of it. Here's my drive shaft. And what we want to do is this is going to go onto the bottom. So I'm going to rotate around so I can see underneath. And we want to connect that part onto this bottom, and we'll go right into the middle. And boom. And that will bring I did the Revolute joint, which is totally fine. So it'll still get it, but we could have done the other one. We hit OK. That'll bring everything over to bring your wheel over. Okay. This one could have been rigid because it's actually going to spin with the axle. I'll show you how to do this here in a second. So I should have made that a rigid, but it totally doesn't matter. Actually, I'm going to go back just to make sure. I'm going to edit that joint type. I'm going to edit that joint type, and I'm going to change it back to a rigid because I don't want to make it there it is. So that's back to a rigid joint. So that's going to be a rigid joint for you, and it's going to spin with the axle. You'll see what it does here in a second. So here's my wheel. Now, obviously, I would move this left or right to get it set up to where I want it to be so that I've got it all set up. But here's what we've got now. It's really cool with this. So when I get to this joint, and you're going to notice on this joint that it is, let's undo this. Let's edit this joint type, and there it is. That's our joint. So then if we rotate this, it should be our, yes. Okay. So now let's do this again. So we've got this. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to insert in that wheel again, and we're going to do this the right way. So I messed that up where we had the, all right. So we're going to do our joint again, but this time we're going to make this second one rigid like it's supposed to. So we go to the inside, hit J for joint. I'm going to go to motion, change this back to rigid, come into the center here for the position. I'm going to pick right in the center of that bottom piece. Perfect. Then I'm going to come over to where we're going to put it in the motor. All right. And this is going to go underneath. And I'm going to zoom in here, and it's going to go right on this bottom side, put it right in the middle. There it is. And I hit OK, and it'll bring the whole wheel over. Okay, so now I've got my motor there, and we'd adjust it to where we want. So now this is what's really cool with this when we do that Revolute joint. As you notice, we've got this, you see this, we've got this blue flag, okay? When we click on that and we double click it, it gives us our Revolute joint. And then what we can do is we can test our joint and rotate it. So what we're rotating is we're spinning the whole axle, which is spinning our wheel. And if we had chain attached to it or a belt drive or anything else, it would rotate with it. So that's why you would use those Revolute joints, so that you can show the motion when you're doing your double reverse 4 bars or whatever it is that you've got. So once you get set up and you get everything done, what we're going to do is we're going to create. So now we've got this, and you see this took us a while. This video is about 30 minutes. I apologize for the length, but it's just kind of really trying to get you the basis of what we've got here. So this is our motor here. We need to repeat this 4 different times, right? Or 3 more times. So the way we're going to do that is we can actually create sub assemblies within our main component. And so what that's going to do is it's going to make us our section. So if you have, say you've got one section of a double reverse 4 bar and you duplicate it, so you make 3 other sections of 4 other sections, or in this case, our drive pods, we can set up and say, here's our 4 wheels. We're going to have a 4-motor drivetrain. We can set up everything the way that we want to. So the way that we're going to do this is I'm going to go in, I'm going to click on Create Assembly. So right up at the top, or New Component, under Assemble, we're going to create ourselves a new component. So I'm going to left click on this to create a new component. Now, what we want to do is it's going to be a standard component. So our options are to choose between standard or sheet metal. So it's always a standard component. We're going to make it internal. What internal means is it's a part of our robot chassis that we're creating. You're not going to make an external component. So your external components are going to be over here that you could pull in for other things. So we're going to make it a part of this motor. It's an external component. And then what we don't want to activate it. We don't want to activate it. And from the parent, it's coming out of, we're going to make these components from existing components that are already in our chassis, if you will. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit OK. And then everything is going to be, we're going to have our full chassis of everything that we've got. So now what we're going to do is, I forgot to tell you here, we're going to edit this real fast. What we should have done, let me delete this real fast. I'm going to show you again here. I'm going to delete this real fast. We're going to create our component again. I forgot to tell you, we got to give it a name. So we want to give this a name. So what I'm going to do is we're going to call this drive pod. So this is going to be our drive pod. It's not activated. It's from the parent component. We're going to hit OK. Okay, so now this is our drive pod. So now what we're going to do is we're going to select everything that we want to be a part of our drive pod. So the easiest way to do it is we want our motor. So I'm going to click on my motor. I'm going to also hold down the shift key and I'm going to click on the bearing flat because we want the bearing flat to be a part of it. Hold down the shift key, my second bearing flat, my drive shaft, and our omni wheel. So those are all going to be parts of our component. Now what we can do with this is we're going to take these and I'm going to drag all of these in to our drive pod. And when I drag them into our drive pod, we've created a sub assembly that is now called our drive pod. Now, one of the things that's important with your drive pod or with any assembly that you make is you have to make it so that your timeline is at the end of whatever section you've created into your drive pod, right? Or whatever it is. So I can't have my timeline here in the middle, then go back and make these drive pods. So your timeline would always be at the end of wherever you're at. So when you decide you want to make your component, you've got it. Now, what's neat with this is, so I've got my drive pod here. And so now what I can do is I can right click on my drive pod. And what I can do here is I can say, copy my drive pod, right? And then what I can do is I can right click. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my paste. And I've pasted in a new drive pod. And so then what I can do is with this drive pod, I can hit that I want to move it. So I'm going to move my X. Let's just to show you here. Let's move the X 6 inches. Here's my second drive pod. So now what I can do with this is I hit OK on it and I've got my second drive pod. So this drive pod, I'm going to insert in. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to find my joint. So I've already got everything. Now, obviously, if you're having it, if this is set up on a drivetrain or wherever it is, you would have, maybe you'd have a gear on here, a gearing system, whatever else you might need to have with it. But what I'm going to do is I am going to find that face. And so I'm going to rotate this around just a little bit. And actually, I can just do this one here. So I'm going to click J for join. I'm going to find this opening here, click on the centerpiece. Now remember, this is going to go in my fifth hole. So I got to know that I am 1, 2 to the left of it, of wherever it is. So of whatever I've got. So now what I'm going to do is go back in. I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to put this on the opposite side. So I'm going to put this one right on this side here. So this is going to go, so this would be my fifth hole. So this would be 6, that'd be 7th is what I did. So if I want it to line up just right, I'm going to come on the inside of this one here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to get this lined up. So I've got here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to come on the inside, click on the face, click on the center. Same thing. We got to go down that 0.091. So I'm going to go down 0.091, enter. Now check this out. So I have I did my joint on the wrong one. So I'm gonna adjust that joint. I did no, I did. I gotta rotate it around. Yes, I did. I should have done it on the inside here. So I'm gonna undo that. Let's undo that and create that joint again. If I put it onto the right C channel, I'd get it. So I gotta put it on my inside C channel. So I'm gonna do here and joint, face, center, and then I'm going to put mine on the inside here, right here. So I'm going to come in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to come in, center, top, bring it down. Oh, I want to rotate it. I want to bring it down. Bring it down, 0.091, enter, and there it is. So now you have 2 of your drive pods. So I would have my second drive pod here, and you notice it brought everything over. I have my bearing flats, I have my wheels, I have everything set up so it looks exactly as we want. So I could do that for my second or my third and my fourth motors as well. So this is a great start to your chassis and using Fusion 360 for CAD design.